This is Brent Allan Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com. And this is the elders at In Church. That's me and Dan Scattum. We call him Montana Dan. And we're going to talk a little bit today about Medicare and what's going on in Montana. Now, this is something that I'm going to have to ask him about, Dan, because I'm not in Montana and I'm not somebody that lives there and follows exactly what's going on. But Dan has been in the state legislature and he's attuned to the shenanigans that go on there. Dan, how are you this morning?
I'm good, thank you, Brent. And you? We got a little reprieve of the Arctic weather.
Well, yeah.
Refreshing. The snow will get hard now.
You think it's going to get cold in Montana again this year?
Oh yeah, it can't stay good all that very long.
Well, this is a marker for me that tells me how it is in different places. When do the Easter flowers come up where you live in Montana? What month?
Some of the brave ones on the south side of the house, you see them a little bit in April, but mostly May.
Well, that tells me something. See, now back where I come from in the Wabash Valley, it'll come in March. And down in North Alabama, I've been down there and I've seen the Easter flowers come up in middle of February. And you're talking about April, but mostly May. That tells me something about the climate there. Of course, I know it's colder there. Then as you go across the mountains from you, the Bitterroots and all those, and get over toward Idaho and Washington, it gets a little warmer, I've discovered, because of having traveled through there, because of the ocean breezes coming up the Columbia River Valley, coming inland. Yeah, inland, clean up 700 miles or so to Lewiston and Clarkston, Idaho. It's a seaport, inland seaport. And they call some parts of that, Dan, the banana belt because it gets so warm in the winter. But that's not the way it is where you are. Well, Dan,
on the west side of the Continental Divide, there's that area over there. It's quite a bit warmer here than here. So.
Yes, you're cut off from
and more moisture.
Yes, you're cut off from the ocean, and you're not far from the Tetons and all that. Oh yeah, it's terrible winters there. You don't have shelter. Well, I like to follow the weather, as some people say. Well, they say this. I had a Russian tell me this, Dan. An immigrant from Russia said they have a saying in Russia that if you don't have anything else to talk about, you talk about the weather. Well, that's true. But in my world, no kidding, Dan, I still talk to my mother, and she wants to talk about the weather, and that's what dominates the conversation because she grew up in a world, and she's well over 90, pushing 100 now, and her dad too. They lived by the weather, and by the weather they lived and died because they farmed, and we didn't have irrigation, and we depended upon the rains in a very heavy and special way. And so that's what we get accustomed to talking about. And of course, it's still important to talk about the weather when it comes to crops. But I want to get to what this all has to do with DJ Trump and his scorched earth policies. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a good way. He's doing what needs to be done. He's right-headed. Of course, none of us agree with everything the other fellow does, but he's right-headed. He's trying to cut the waste. And that has an impact on the states, and particularly you're talking about Montana, and particularly you're talking about Medicare, and particularly you're talking about you said the long nine, the senators, is that what they call them?
Well, the nickname by some of them is the out-of-line nine.
Oh, the out-of-line nine. Now, the reason I said that, Dan, because back in my world, everybody back there knows about the long nine in the state legislature. That came from our past when Abe Lincoln and 8 other fellows that were rather gangly and long were dominating the state legislature. So they called them the long nine, but they might have been for good things. But you're talking about the what do you say, out of line nine? Out of line
Yep.
with what? Out of line with what?
Well, uh, they're trying to push through Medicare expansion or continue, and they've kind of hijacked the whole Montana Senate by voting with the Democrats, and they're actually killing good bills that they would otherwise be voting for.
Well, so the truth is they're not really Republicans. Is that it?
If you tell them that, you'll get some fire back at you.
But do you know any of them personally?
Yes, I do.
I thought you'd say no. Oh, that makes it even more interesting.
I should have said no.
So is it possible that some of these out of line nine senators were in the state legislature when you served?
Yes. So, yeah, a couple of them, and then the spouse of one of them that I was pretty good friends with.
Were they out of line when they're in the state legislature?
Not back then.
What do you think happens, Dan? I mean, have you heard this story, Dan, or maybe seen it happen? You know a guy. He's a great guy. He's running for state legislature. He goes off the state capitol, and within a year or two, you can't even recognize him. Have you seen this where you are?
Yes.
What?
Yep.
Okay. I'm going to ask you. Did that happen to you?
Personally?
Mm-hmm.
Or did I see it happen?
Both. First, personally.
No, I didn't do the compromising on that. No.
Did that hurt you?
Well, I was a one-term legislator.
So, do you think that had something to do with it?
Yeah.
Well, clearly. Oh, okay. So you were there. You didn't compromise on anything. You just quietly, in your kind way, voted no to taxes and no to government expansion, etc.
Yep. That was when Obama was pushing the Obamacare. So that's when we got the wonderful marijuana started really pushing hard too. A couple of big issues during that section.
All right. Well, going back to, were you in the legislature when Obama was running for office and they were having the hassle over the birther? Was he a natural-born citizen?
Yes, that was a topic too.
So, was any legislation offered to try to force candidates for the United States to prove that they were natural-born citizens to Montana before they were put on the ballot?
No, there was. I don't think so. Well, there was some stuff, bill drafts that were put in, but they never made it to an actual bill.
Who controlled the legislature when you were there? What party?
The year I got in, we had a supermajority in the House and a slim majority in the Senate, and then a Democrat governor.
And so the Republicans controlled both houses of the state legislature, the Senate by a slim margin.
Mm-hmm.
Were you able to get anything through during that year?
We got quite a bit of stuff through, but it all got vetoed, and then there wasn't enough backbone to override the vetoes.
Well, in your experience then, did you expect that to happen, being a new legislator? Did you expect what you wanted to get done to be shot down and kicked aside across the board?
No, that wasn't what I thought would happen when I first went. I thought the grandiose thing, we'd be able to fix a lot of stuff.
Well, let me jump ahead. I want to ask more about you and why you ran, who talked you into it, and all that. But right now, let's jump ahead. You had mentioned about the out of time nine, and you know some of them, and you're familiar with how the the process works in the legislative process. What are these out of time nine doing, and is it causing a ruckus in the whole blasted state? And in general, where is Montana on what Trump is doing?
Well, I'll start with the last one first. The grassroots people, the people are very appreciative of what's happening, except probably a real slim minority.
Okay.
But they're the loud screamers, so you hear a lot about it. But I think most people are appreciative of what's happening.
Okay.
Long overdue.
And you're not a loud screamer. So you're like a lot of these other Republicans. They just want to quietly go about their business and say, no, I don't believe that. But the screamers somehow in the legislature, what do they do? Threaten people in there to get them to go their way? What's going on?
What do you mean by threaten?
Well, do they threaten the screamers, the left, threaten the legislators on the right of what they will do to them politically if they don't go along with their madness? Is that what happens?
Yeah, I think it's kind of an unspoken thing, but I have personally witnessed in Montana and maybe everywhere else that the Democrats are right in line, and I've seen some of the Democrats, personally seen them getting railed on by other Democrats to stay in line and stay with the party, and the Republican Party doesn't do that. We're more like herding cats.
Oh, okay. So
free thinkers.
Oh, okay. So the Republican Party is not in solidarity, and the culture of those that are in the Republican Party in general, not all of them, but the culture is every man does what he thinks right, and if we want to go this way on this particular vote and this way on this particular vote, it's hard to get them all together. Whereas the Democrats vote as a block.
Yep.
So all this agreement,
they get together and get their talking points assigned to them, and when they're on their talking points, they're pretty intelligent. But if you tilt them off their talking points, they're not much there.
So they're educated to say certain things, or taught, or briefed, maybe is a better word, to say certain things. But again, the vast majority of them don't have a clue what they're talking about or what the question is, really.
Actually, no, unless it's on their points that they were briefed off in their caucus meetings, there's not much there.
Well, to
be honest,
how did you come to this conclusion? In your experience, is there some experience you had to make you realize that they had no foundation of their understanding?
Yeah, well, they'd get off on a subject that they weren't versed on or tutored on. They just fumble and bumble, just like I do sometimes.
Well, we all do if we're ignorant. But you're saying down at the bottom, does the party have a moral compass?
Which party?
The Democrat Party in Montana.
I don't believe so.
What about the Republican Party? Are they just plain moralist, or do they have a foundation for their understanding of right and wrong?
I think the grassroots has a reasonable moral compass. You know, we got to go back to the Bible and say we're all evil. But I think a better idea or a better interaction of a moral compass. And I think that has a lot to do with our education system, and the higher education, sometimes you get the worse things are.
Is there a Christian consensus in Montana, or does Christianity not have much sway in the state?
that's. I think everybody is for country and God, but as a true Christian, maybe not so much.
I find that across the board, pretty everywhere. People want to pound the books and pound the table and talk about the Bible and the Constitution, but I find very few that know what's in those documents or how they apply. However, it seems to me that God works by a critical mass of a minority, so I'm not worried about that. There are those few that want to understand fundamentally. They're not, when I said moralist, I meant a Pollyannish moralist. I find that most people in the Republican Party are Pollyannish moralists. They really don't understand why, and they go more on their feelings of morality than they do on what is true law and what is right. Now, we're watching what's happening with DJ Trump. You talked about the out of line 9, and that's been in the papers or on the internet, apparently, about Medicare and what they're trying to do in the midst of what Trump's trying to do. Explain to me what's going on.
Well, our governor and these out of line 9s in the Democrat Party are wanting to keep pushing Medicare expansion because we got to take care of people, and that's a whole different subject on our medical system. But they've actually voting against things, killing things that they would normally be supporting, just to keep their point up and change leadership positions and stuff like that.
They want to get back into office next election.
Some of them in the areas they live in, I don't know if they'll make it back to the office because of what's going on, but maybe. But they want power now. There's real short term. Yeah, they want on different committees, and Montana switched the president of the Senate, and the president of the Senate is really upset about that, to be polite.
You're saying he's getting real ugly about it, huh?
Yeah, he's kind of the ringleader
of the long, or the out of time 9.
Out of line 9, yep.
Or out of line 9, yeah, out of line, out of time, out of line. Anyway,
yep.
Thank you, Montana Dan. So they are the focus of attention in Montana, those 9, and they don't seem to be phased. Are people screaming and hollering and telling them to straighten their act up, or is it nobody cares?
No, I think a lot of the grassroots people are quite upset.
Yeah. Well, what can be done about it? What pressure can be put on
them? Sometimes I wonder if they're so dug in that you can't reason with them.
So all a fellow can do is vote them out of office.
Sad but true.
Yeah. And they only meet for a few months a year, like 90 days or something?
Yep, 90 days. They're getting close to midway.
Well, we had one lawyer in our little town where I went to high school, and his name was Zolly. Everybody knew Zolly, and he had a plaque on the wall behind his desk when you go in his office, and it says, "No man's life, liberty, or property is safe when the state legislature is in session." Well, I'll say this for Montana. They're wise enough to they know they got to have a state legislature. The Constitution requires it, The state legislature, a Republican form of government, means you got to have a legislative branch, a common law government. But you've kept it to a minimum of one. They're only in session 1/4, only allowed to be in session for 1/4 of the year, 90 days. Is that right?
Every other year too.
Oh, every other year. So it comes out to about 1/8 of a year.
1/8.
You're keeping it.
We're safe the rest of 7/8 of the time.
Yeah, you're keeping the damage. It's called damage control. Damage control. Keep it to a minimum as much as possible. That's commendable. Texas used to be like that. Maybe they still are. And where I'm from, they used to be like that. Uh, but they aren't anymore. Well, um, I thank you, Montana Dan, for filling us in on what's happening in Montana. But there's a lot of, and I take it that's what's happening here. There's a lot of contortions going on over what Trump, the Trump administration is doing. Here's something that bothers me, and I don't know exactly how it got so bad so fast. I think income tax had something to do with it. It seemed to me like most taxes go to the government in Washington, D.C., and not to the state government. Seemed to me like it ought to be the other way around. Most of our taxes ought to go to the state government and not to Washington, D.C. Because what's happening is Washington, D.C. has been in the past able to threaten the states, and that's what's going on here. Your governor wants federal money. So he will do whatever he has to do to get it. And why is it that Montana can't take care of their own business? Why are they dependent upon Washington, D.C.? As long as they're dependent, Washington, D.C. controls the states. You don't have a state government anymore. Is that saying too much, in your opinion, your experience as a legislator?
No, I think you're right on. It's all the government agencies have coaxed us in or bribed us in to not develop in our natural resources. Montana is incredibly rich in natural resources, but we're not harvesting. We're not getting them.
What resources do you have that you're so rich in?
Gold, coal, oil, timber, the egg industry.
The what?
The agriculture.
Oh, ag, huh?
Yep. Quite a few precious metals, copper, silver. There's a big palladium mine not far from here.
And they've been hampered, you're saying?
Yeah, a few years ago, there's a pretty rich vein of gold not far from us, and the federal government shut it down pretty much forever. They can't mine it no more.
They were mining it?
Well, they were working toward it, and they got a little bit too greedy and ran into too much water problems. They went too fast, and they couldn't get the water shut down.
They went down into the ground, though.
Yeah, it's underground.
Then they flooded.
Yep, too much water.
Is it north, south, east, or west of you?
Kind of south.
That's what I figured, because that's where there's a mountain range there, right?
Yep.
Between you and Yellowstone.
Yeah, it's actually, part of it's probably under Yellowstone, but that would probably never happen. It should, but it probably never would.
You know, the law of mining is once you get on a vein like that, you can follow it through the earth to China if it takes you there by right. That's pretty much the law. There are some variations, but we have a place at home. There's a fluorite mine along the Ohio River. And fluorite is the flux that is necessary for the production of steel. And this mine was the only fluorite mine in the United States, I think, until recently in all of America, north and south. And it was shut down back about 30 years ago because they found fluorite in South America finally. But that mine went under the Ohio River and under Kentucky. And they tried to stop them, you know. They wanted, saying, well, that's ours. You can't come over here. But the law was that once you get onto a vein, it's a fascinating subject, the law of the miner. Anyway, yeah, I know you have a lot there, but I didn't know what you would say. I knew timber, of course, cattle. That's huge. I mean, just driving through Montana, if you could count them all, you'd count probably 10,000 head just from the road.
Oh, yeah.
But that's no
Depends
joke.
on the time of year.
Well,
sometimes
yeah, when
they're up out of the way.
And by the way, they're all black. They're all black.
Quite a few of them.
I didn't see any Herefords out there. But at any rate, there's a a lot of that. And you mentioned timber, gold, silver, and other metals. Other metals are becoming more and more important along with the precious metals because of the electronic need of the electronic computer industry. Well, thank you, Montana Dan. Yeah, we want to see, God says, let's tap into that. You can enjoy it, and that's what he wants. And no, there isn't a shortage. There isn't a shortage that I see. And those that study the matter say there's no shortage of gold or silver or copper. Matter of fact, we've just scratched the surface of those and oil, according to what I read from those that spend their life studying mineralization and the subject of supply.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Montana.
Just a quick story.
Oh, go ahead.
Your camera went off, but there's a big war against coal.
Yes.
And there was a bunch of people at a new coal generation plant. I think it's in North Dakota, and they were taking a tour of it, and some of the people there said, "Well, when are they going to fire it up?" And one of the guys said, "It's running at full capacity right now," and they didn't even know it. So coal got a dirty name from the past, but it's the technology has made it a much safer, more environment-friendly process.
Okay, let me make sure I've got the picture. The plant was burning coal, producing electricity, and doing it at full capacity, but it didn't even look like any smoke was coming out of the stack. Is that kind of the idea you're talking about?
Not very little. Yep.
Very little. Yeah. No, I agree.
It's actually not smoke. It's more vapor, water vapor.
Water vapor. Yeah, and they're scrubbing. They have what they call scrubbing, to scrub all the pollutants out of what comes out. Mostly what comes out is just water, almost entirely. Our technology has changed so much. Yeah. No, I understand that too. So that's all the Democrats or the left or the environmentalists, whoever they are, that say that coal is dangerous to the environment, are making arguments that they made 50 years ago, and that doesn't apply anymore. And that's what I've noticed about the left. They keep trying to drag up old bones, drag old corpses out of the graves by the ears, and dance about them as though they were new and novel, and they don't have any bearing. I saw that too. I see it now. And that's not just for production of coal. Here we are trying to do a whole lot of things, and the only thing the left can scream and holler about the Trump administration now is, "You're racist." That's all they can say. They haven't got anything else to say. That comes from the 1950s and the 1960s and the 1970s. Well, that's over. No, we're not racist. Truth is, compared to the rest of the world, we haven't even been racist. Well, it's always around. But America is the least racist country in the world. We're the only country in the world where people from all over the world live side by side, work side by side, go to church side by side, to the degree of different races. Yes, races. That means different ancestry. Not appearance, but different ancestry. Often the appearance is different. We do that in America to a degree no one has ever done it in the history of the world, with the possible exception of pagan Rome. Possibly. But that didn't last. Christianity, of course, entered the scene. But we're a melting pot of people. I'm not taking a position on the rightness, the wrongness of it, how it's done. I just know it's fact of history. Here we are. Well, thank you, Montana Dan. Appreciate you taking time to talk. And this is Brent Allan Winters, Montana Dan, elders at In Church. Get together when we can and kick around a few subjects that are in the news and just apply our experiences to them. Join us again next time. Go to commonlawyer.com and join us for our course, our law school course at Winters Inn. Right now we're teaching a course on Christian nationhood.
And it's a good one.
It's a good one. Well, Dan must be watching. We're kicking around the idea. Is it a possibility? Is it a reality? Where does it exist in the world? How has it existed in the past? Was it helpful or hurtful? things like that. Well, thank you, Montana Dan. This is commonlawyer.com and the elders from In Church.